So my name's Laura Dilloway. I work for Inkle Studios, and we are making Kevin's Fault. You play as an archaeologist. Her name is Aliyah El-Azra, and the story starts when you are called back to the university, which is your base, and your professor says, hey, this person's gone missing. I'd like you to go find them for me. And so you go off on an adventure trying to find where this guy's gone. And as you do so, you sort of start digging up weird things and discovering that he was he was looking for something too, and what he was looking for was actually very different and doesn't really belong in what you think is your world. So it's kind of a voyage of discovery, finding out about who you are, where your people came from, and like the history of the world around you and how it might not be what you think it might be. And we also wanted to do something that was doing archaeology, but not in the way that it's very usually portrayed. So, like, Tomb Raider and potentially Uncharted are archaeology. You're supposed to be digging up stuff from the past, but actually you're just kind of running around knifing baddies. And so it was kind of nice to take it back to the roots and get it a little bit more scientific and more cerebral. There's a really great word that someone's described this as. So yeah, taking it back to its roots there, really. In terms of like the character inspiration, there was a really amazing lady, an Egyptian Egyptologist working in Egypt. Her name was Monica Hano, and she basically was doing loads of really great work in terms of like bringing the history of Egypt back to its current day people. And yeah, so she was kind of the starting point for the character and where that kind of came from. And then the rest is building the world around it and telling a really interesting story. And the story is the key, and this is absolutely king. Everything that has been developed, or all the environments that have been built have come from the story, and everything is linked together in that way that it all ties together really nicely. The story evolves, it's non-linear, and it evolves depending on the way you play, because we track everything that you do, everything you say, every place you've been, every artifact you pick up. We know all these things, and so we can generate options to give you in the story that will allow you to play based on those options. So if you're really horrible to someone, they're not going to help you. And then, they'll give you, the story will then progress in a different way as if you were nice to them or kind to them and showed them an artifact that brought up an interesting story or interesting anecdote. Like, you can play the story in pretty much any order. It's gated in a sense that we will give you breadcrumbs. You can't go to a location, or you can't look for a location unless you know of its existence. But as you talk to people, as you pick up artifacts, it will give you the idea that, oh, maybe there's, I've got an artifact like this and I've got an artifact like this, and I think they're from the same source. And then it'll be like, right, I need to go look for that source. And that will obviously then lead into the story more. You could play it not visiting all the locations. You could play it visiting all of them. And there are different endings as well. So it's really a really dynamic story. And the world, as an environment artist, it's been really fascinating building the world as well, because if I ask John, what's the story of this level that I'm building, he's very clear on, this is what's happened here, this is where this bit of the world has come from, this is what happens after it, this is how it sits in the timeline of the world. And to have something so clearly defined is kind of really interesting, because then you can start crafting environments like, if I have two different locations that are from a similar era, then I can start making them look the same and bringing similar elements in with that. And I love the story. I think it's really interesting, and I really hope people that really engage with it, the more you dig, the more you question your robot PAL 6, the more you talk to people, the more artifacts you pick up, the more you'll learn. And we've got a new game plus as well, which unlocks more stuff. Like, it's not just a different difficulty level, it's like extra things. Like, we've enriched the story. So it's completely replayable as well because of this dynamic nature of how it fits together. So you can play it once, and then you can play it twice, and the second time will be completely different to the first. So you can create a different route, create a different adventure each time you play. And I think that's a really fresh and a really interesting way of approaching narrative, and I really hope people love it. The devil that you can see here today is a very strong Middle Eastern look, you might say, but we've also looked at Gothic cathedrals and stuff from the UK, and oh good grief, mud huts from way back cave eras, I suppose. So there's a full range of places that we've taken inspiration from all over the world. In fact, there's a level or an environment I should say, that's set somewhere we looked at barley quite a lot. We've got a lot of rice fields. the wooden huts on stilts, that kind of thing. So like really global influences to kind of create this sense of a whole world in this very small location, which is quite difficult because there's been 2 of us on majority production and then 3 environment artists. We had another lady for a year, so a very small team. It's been a challenge, but really good. So I was building all the levels as well, so we don't have a level designer as such. Like John, the narrative designer, would give me a paint drawing of what he wanted the level to be laid out like, and I'd have to decode some scribbles and be like, I think this is a building, and build it up from that. But the really good thing about doing that was because I could then build it in the style that I wanted it to look like. So once I know what the history of a location is, I can then just kind of create a very visual grey box in that sense, and then you're just adding textures and adding value and adding any tweaks that need to be made. So you solve so many of the normal level design problems very early in the process, and we didn't have anything like cover and weird crates stuck in the middle of the floor to worry about, which is really good. And then it was just a case of like managing reuse, like how much value can we get from maybe modifying this texture very slightly and then reusing it somewhere else. Just being really smart about how we produce things, basically trying not to waste as much time as possible, keeping a tight track on where we were in terms of production and what had been completed, what hadn't, what were the need to do's, what were the quite like to do's, and what were the really only necessary kind of things. We've got one character artist in Annie. She has drawn all of the characters and all of the several thousand frames in this game. Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. And by drawing them, we've been able to create real faces, real expressions, and we can also add new characters really easily. Like we have such a diverse cast because if we need a new character, we just draw it. And that's really great freedom to be able to have. And I think we don't have any of the constraints of like, I need to re-rig things or I need to reskin things. We just do it. And I think we've been able to add so much like value and so much diversity into our cast of characters because of it. I like another reasoning right at the beginning was this whole graphic novel style of things, and so partly the 2D characters led really strongly into that, and also we wanted to create something where you can screenshot any frame and it looks like something out of a graphic novel, and I really think that we've achieved that. And we've had a lot of people getting really excited about the hieroglyphic language that we created. So that's one of the parts of the game that I haven't really spoken about actually. We've created an entire ancient language that you can discover. So as you go around, like I said, the inscriptions that I mentioned, this is what you're discovering. You're finding these like scribbled glyphs written on things. And so you can pick those up and you can start translating them. And it's been crafted in a way, it sounds crazy, but you do kind of pick it up as you go along. Like when you first, you know nothing, so you have to start guessing, but you can look at something and go, that looks a bit like a plant, maybe it's a garden, so stuff like that. And then the more you see that symbol, you can either clarify that you were right and say, okay, I thought that was a garden, that's got the same symbol in it, maybe it means plant. And then maybe the plant means a flower. So you can make these connections. But if it starts not making sense, then eventually she'll go, I'm not sure about that anymore. And you can go off down a different route. So it coaxes you in the right direction without ever being, this is the answer, which is really nice, actually. It's so well balanced. Like, they've really done a really great job on that. With inspirations have been taken from like things like hieroglyphs and cuneiform and pictorial languages like the Eastern scriptural languages, and German randomly, which has very small words that sort of are atomized structures. So you put lots of small words together to create a longer word, and like that's something we lean on quite heavily. And so you can start recognizing different glyphs and being like, and sort of picking it apart and stuff like that, and it just works really well. I think this is a labor of love, especially, I've only been on the project for a couple of years, but it's kind of all-consuming, and I think in that way, because we're such a small team, it really feels like a group effort. Like everyone has played such a key role, and for the John and Joe, the founders of Inkle, who've been working on this for 4 years, like it's a behemoth for them, like it's absolutely huge. And so to get to this point, I think is potentially somewhere they couldn't quite see happening, but it's exciting and it's terrifying, because it is a huge leap from what they've done previously as a company.